The morning air at Longridge Archery Range was crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and earth as the sun began its slow climb over the distant hills. The sprawling range stretched out before the early risers, rows of targets lined meticulously at varying distances, their brightly colored bullseyes catching the first golden rays. Birds chirped from the treetops, and a gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, stirring the tension that hummed quietly beneath the serene landscape. It was competition day, the kind that drew the best archers from across the region, their nerves taut and muscles primed for precision. Maya Collins stood near the edge of the shooting line, her breath steady despite the fluttering in her chest. She pulled her jacket tighter around her slender frame, eyes fixed on the targets downrange. The weight of her recurve bow rested comfortably in her left hand, worn leather grips smoothed by countless hours of practice. Though new to this world of archery, Maya carried with her the endurance and focus forged from years as a track athlete, a background that had taught her the discipline necessary to keep pushing through doubt and fatigue. The range was already alive with activity. Coaches barked orders, archers adjusted their stances, and the rhythmic twang of bowstrings filled the air. Maya's gaze shifted toward the far end where the veteran team was assembling, their presence commanding attention. Coach Reynolds, a towering figure with a weathered face that betrayed decades of experience, surveyed the scene with a quiet intensity. Beside him, Blake, the star archer whose reputation was as sharp as his aim, moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to the spotlight. His broad shoulders and focused expression marked him unmistakably as the team's leader, and the others followed his lead without question. Maya watched the group with a mixture of awe and apprehension. She had only recently been hired at Longridge, a position that allowed her to train during quieter hours but kept her on the periphery of the competitive archery community. Her transition from the track to the range had been gradual and solitary, marked by early mornings and late nights spent perfecting her draw and release. Now, surrounded by established athletes and seasoned coaches, she felt the weight of her newcomer status keenly. The cold morning sun angled low, casting long shadows across the grass as the veterans began their warm-ups. Blades of dew-laden grass shimmered beneath their feet, and the sharp sound of arrows slicing through the air underscored the seriousness of the moment. Maya's fingers flexed instinctively around the bowstring, a quiet reminder of the journey that had brought her here. The distant hum of conversations mixed with the occasional clatter of equipment being set down, creating a backdrop of tense anticipation. Coach Reynolds raised his voice, calling the group to attention. "All right, team. Let's keep it tight today. Precision over power. Eyes on the prize." His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement, the kind of unspoken understanding that came from years of shared victories and losses. Blake stepped forward, taking his place at the firing line with a calm that bordered on arrogance. His reputation was built on consistency and an uncanny ability to read the wind, skills that Maya admired even as they intimidated her. Maya shifted her weight, trying to blend into the background but unable to entirely escape the feeling of being watched. The archery community was close-knit, and newcomers often had to prove their worth through grit rather than words. She had heard whispers among the staff about the veteran skepticism toward her presence, an unspoken challenge to her legitimacy as an archer. But Maya had never been one to back down from a challenge, even when it came cloaked in doubt and dismissal. The targets at 30, 50, and 70 yards beckoned, each representing a step up in difficulty. Maya focused on the closest set, drawing her bowstring back slowly, feeling the familiar tension build in her shoulders and arms. The wind was steady, a gentle breeze from the northwest that could either aid or disrupt an arrow's flight depending on how it was accounted for. She exhaled calmly, releasing the arrow with a smooth motion. The twang of the string echoed sharply, and the arrow found its mark just shy of the bullseye, a promising start. Nearby, Maya caught a glimpse of Blake adjusting his stance, his eyes narrowing with concentration. The veteran archer's movements were precise, almost mechanical in their repetition, but beneath the surface, there was a flicker of frustration. This was the kind of day when every shot counted, and Blake's usual confidence seemed tempered by the pressure. Maya's pulse quickened as she realized the stakes were higher than she had imagined. As the morning wore on, the range filled with the sound of arrows striking targets and the occasional murmur of critique from coaches. The veteran team moved through their drills efficiently, their expertise evident in every flick of the wrist and shift of weight. Maya kept to her place near the sidelines, silently observing, learning not just from her own practice but from the nuanced techniques of those around her. The shadows shifted as the sun climbed higher, and the tension on the range grew palpable. Maya's thoughts drifted briefly to the path that had led her here, the endless laps on the track, the quiet moments of frustration when progress seemed slow, and the resolve that had carried her beyond the familiar into this new and demanding world. She was no longer just a newcomer. She was a contender, ready to stake her claim amidst the whispers and the doubts. Coach Reynolds called a brief pause, gathering the team for a quick discussion. His gaze swept over the group, lingering briefly on Maya before turning back to Blake and the others. The air was thick with unspoken expectations, a silent challenge waiting to be met. Maya's heart beat steadily, her fingers tightening around the bow as she prepared for whatever was to come next. The sprawling Longridge archery range, with its morning light and charged atmosphere, was no longer just a place of practice. It was the stage upon which her story was beginning to unfold. The atmosphere at Longridge Archery Range shifted as the veteran team resumed their drills, the earlier quiet tension now edged with a sharper undercurrent. Blake took his place at the firing line again, his jaw clenched and eyes narrowed in determination. The target stood firm in the morning light, but Blake's shots began to stray unpredictably, his arrows dipping and veering just enough to miss the center. Frustration etched itself deeper into his expression with each release. Maya watched from the sidelines, her pulse steady but her mind racing. She had seen enough to recognize the telltale signs of a shooter struggling with consistency: tension in the shoulders, a slight forward lean, and a grip that was too tight. Though her place was at the edge of the group, an invisible barrier of experience and reputation kept her words at bay. The murmurs from the veteran team echoed in her ears, a mix of doubt and dismissal that made her hesitate. Blake's latest arrow thudded into the grass, far from the bullseye. His breath came in short bursts, and he muttered under his breath, cursing his own hands. The team exchanged glances, some shaking their heads, others avoiding eye contact. The weight of expectation pressed heavily on Blake, the star archer who was suddenly vulnerable. Maya's eyes flicked to the coach, who stood nearby with arms crossed, observing the scene silently. Coach Reynolds' gaze was sharp but unreadable, as if waiting for something to break the surface. The moment stretched, the quiet broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a crow. Summoning a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, Maya stepped forward tentatively. Maybe, if you adjust your stance a little, it might help with balance. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried across the small gap between her and the group. The reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Blake's eyes snapped to her, a flicker of surprise quickly replaced by a sardonic smirk. "What do you know about stance?" he said loud enough for others to hear, his tone dripping with condescension. The team chuckled softly, the sound sharp and dismissive. Coach Reynolds raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The veterans exchanged amused glances, clearly entertained by the newcomer's audacity. Maya felt her cheeks flush, the sting of their skepticism a familiar ache. She knew she was an outsider here, her place uncertain amidst these seasoned competitors. But the frustration on Blake's face was real, and Maya couldn't help but keep watching. She noticed how his right foot was slightly too far forward, throwing off his center of gravity, and how his shoulders were tense, pulling the bowstring unevenly. It was the kind of detail that might seem small to an observer but could unravel an archer's shot. Blake shook his head, brushing off her suggestion. "I don't need tips from the range girl," he said, his voice loud enough to draw a few more chuckles. The nickname stung, but Maya kept her gaze steady, refusing to retreat. As Blake prepared for another shot, Maya studied his form carefully. The wind had shifted slightly, coming now from the east, and Blake didn't seem to account for it. His shoulders tensed again, and his grip tightened involuntarily. When the arrow left the bow, it dipped low left, missing the target by a wide margin. A few of the veterans exchanged glances, and Blake's frustration deepened. "This day's a mess," he muttered, stepping back from the line. His usual confidence was shaken, and the team's joviality faded into a more serious mood. Maya's mind raced. She wanted to say something more, to offer the observation she'd made, but the unspoken rules of this tight-knit group held her back. Still, she couldn't ignore what she saw. This wasn't just an off day, it was a break in the fundamentals, the very foundation of their craft. The silence stretched as Blake paced near the equipment tent, hands running through his hair in frustration. Maya glanced toward Coach Reynolds, who finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Blake, you're overcompensating. Relax your shoulders and focus on your anchor point." Blake nodded stiffly but didn't respond. The coach's words were standard advice, but Maya sensed they weren't enough this time. Maya took a breath and stepped forward again, this time more confidently. "If you're closing your right eye too much, it can throw off your alignment," she said, eyes locking briefly with Blake's. "And pulling your shoulder into the bow can cause inconsistency in your shot." The group fell silent. A few heads turned toward her, surprise mingling with curiosity. Maya knew her words were bold, especially coming from someone so new, but she spoke from a place of quiet certainty built on hours of watching and practicing. Blake's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of intrigue. "You think you can do better?" he challenged, his voice low but edged with a hint of respect disguised as bravado. Maya hesitated, the spotlight suddenly intense. The other archers shifted, their skepticism palpable but tinged now with genuine interest. Coach Reynolds stepped forward, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. "Why don't you show us, Maya?" The invitation was unexpected, a door opening in a space she had only dared to peek through. Maya felt the weight of every gaze, the unspoken challenge to prove that she was more than just a newcomer with a few tips. The wind whispered softly through the trees, as if urging her forward. She nodded, stepping toward the firing line, feeling the familiar grip of her bow in her hands. The crowd's chatter dimmed to a hush, the tension coalescing into a single point of focus. Maya's heart raced, but her breath remained steady, a rhythm she had learned on the track when every second and every movement mattered. Drawing the bowstring back, she centered her thoughts on the fundamentals: stance, grip, breath, and anchor. The wind was steady now, a gentle breeze that could be accounted for with care. She exhaled slowly and released. The arrow flew true, striking the target just shy of the bullseye. Encouraged, Maya adjusted slightly, drawing again with focus sharpened by the weight of the moment. Her second arrow found the center, a crisp thud signaling precision. The third arrow followed, just off center but well within the scoring ring. Murmurs rippled through the group. Blake's eyes widened, the smirk replaced by a look of reconsideration. Coach Reynolds nodded approvingly but remained silent, letting the shot speak. Maya lowered her bow, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She glanced around, seeing the team's expressions shift from amusement to respect, the invisible walls beginning to crack. The day's competition had changed, and so had her place within it. The sudden quiet that fell over Longridge Archery Range felt almost surreal. Maya stood at the firing line, her bow still raised, the echo of her last arrow's thud lingering in the crisp morning air. The usual sounds of shifting feet and whispered commentary faded into a heavy silence, as if the entire range had collectively held its breath. Coach Reynolds stepped forward, eyes narrowing thoughtfully, his presence commanding attention without a single word. "All right, Maya," he said finally, his voice steady and deliberate, cutting through the tension. "If you're so confident, why don't you prove it? Take your shot at the 90-yard target." His gaze swept over the assembled archers, many of whom exchanged surprised glances. 90 yards was a distance reserved for the most experienced shooters, a test of precision and endurance few newcomers dared attempt. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, the challenge both daunting and electrifying. This was the moment that could shift everything, her place among these veterans, her own belief in her abilities. She nodded once, a quiet affirmation that she was ready to step into the spotlight. She moved to the 90-yard firing line, the distance making the target appear smaller, more distant, almost abstract against the backdrop of trees and sky. The air felt cooler here, the breeze carrying a faint scent of pine and damp earth. Maya took a deep breath, centering herself amidst the murmurs of the watching crowd. Her fingers brushed the bowstring with practiced ease, recalling the countless hours spent refining her technique in solitude. The fundamentals were her foundation: stance balanced, grip relaxed but firm, breath controlled, and anchor point consistent. The wind whispered through the leaves, a gentle but persistent presence that demanded respect. Maya raised her bow, drawing the string back smoothly, feeling the tension build in her arms and shoulders. Her eyes locked onto the distant target, narrowing her focus until everything else blurred into the background. She exhaled slowly, releasing the arrow with a fluid motion that felt both natural and precise. The arrow soared through the air, cutting a clean arc against the sky. Time seemed to slow as it approached the target, the world narrowing to the moment of impact. A sharp, satisfying thud echoed as the arrow struck dead center, bullseye. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Maya's cheeks flushed with a mix of relief and exhilaration, but she didn't waver. She knocked a second arrow, drawing once more with the same steady rhythm, adjusting subtly for the faint breeze that now shifted from the northeast. The second arrow flew true, landing with a solid hit just beside the bullseye. Encouraged, Maya prepared her third shot, the weight of the moment pressing upon her but not breaking her concentration. The release was clean, the arrow embedding itself near the center of the target, a testament to her steady hand and growing confidence. Coach Reynolds stepped forward, a rare smile touching his lips. "That's something we don't see very often," he said, his voice carrying the approval of a seasoned mentor. "You just shattered the range record for that distance." The murmurs swelled into whispers of admiration. Blake's earlier arrogance seemed to falter, replaced by a grudging respect as he watched Maya lower her bow. The team, once dismissive, now looked at her through new eyes that recognized talent and determination. Maya's heartbeat slowed, her breath evening out as the adrenaline ebbing away left a quiet sense of accomplishment. She glanced briefly at Coach Reynolds, whose nod was both an acknowledgement and an invitation. The veteran archer's challenge had become an opportunity, transforming the dynamics on the range with a single, perfect shot. As the team gathered around, their expressions softened, and questions replaced sneers. Maya found herself answering queries about her training, her background, and her approach to the sport. The gap that had once separated her from these seasoned competitors began to close, bridged by shared respect and the undeniable proof of skill. Blake stepped forward, his gaze steady now, no longer masking uncertainty with sarcasm. "Looks like you've earned a place here," he said, extending a hand that Maya shook firmly. The gesture was simple but powerful, a tacit acceptance that spoke louder than words. Coach Reynolds clapped his hands together, breaking the momentary pause. "We'll be training together from now on," he announced. "Maya, welcome to the team. We expect great things." The weight of the day lifted, replaced by a surge of possibility. Maya's journey, once solitary and uncertain, was now intertwined with the legacy of Longridge Archery Range and the athletes who called her home. The challenge had been met, the revelation made, and the path forward was clear, one marked by determination, respect, and the promise of growth. The air at Longridge Archery Range felt different now, charged with a new energy that had taken root in the wake of Maya's performance. The earlier skepticism that had clung to her like a shadow was fading, replaced by a cautious admiration that rippled through the veteran team. The once closed circle was beginning to open, and Maya sensed the subtle shift as she moved among the archers who had only moments before dismissed her. Coach Reynolds gathered the team beneath the shade of an old oak, the afternoon sun filtering through the leaves and casting dappled patterns on the grass. His gaze swept over the group, lingering on Maya with a measured warmth that was rare from the longtime mentor. "You've shown us something today," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of genuine respect. "Maya, we want you to train with us. Your skills and insights would be an asset to this team." The words settled over Maya like a balm, soothing the lingering doubt she had carried since her arrival. The invitation was more than a gesture. It was a validation of her hard work and quiet determination. She nodded, feeling the familiar surge of determination that had fueled her transition from track to archery. Blake, who had been standing slightly apart, stepped forward, his expression less guarded now. The arrogance that had marked his earlier dismissal had softened, replaced by a grudging respect that was visible in the tilt of his head and the steady gaze he fixed on Maya. "I was wrong about you," he admitted, his voice low but sincere. "You've got a good eye and steady hands. We could use that on the team." The others murmured their agreement, some offering tentative smiles, others nodding as they adjusted their stances. The dynamic among them was changing, the old hierarchies bending under the weight of Maya's unexpected arrival. For the first time, she felt the sense of belonging that had eluded her since stepping onto the range. As the afternoon progressed, Maya found herself drawn into the rhythm of the team's training. They moved with a practiced grace, their shots a symphony of precision and control. Maya's presence was no longer that of an outsider observing from the edges. She was a participant, her own shots blending into the collective chorus of arrows striking targets. Conversations began to flow more freely, the ice of skepticism melting into dialogue about technique and strategy. Maya shared her observations about stance and release, insights born from both her own practice and the fresh perspective of an athlete new to the sport. The team listened, their initial resistance giving way to curiosity and, eventually, appreciation. Blake approached her during a break, a water bottle in hand and a more relaxed demeanor than before. "I've been stuck on a problem with my draw length," he confessed, gesturing toward his bow. "Maybe you can take a look. Could use another set of eyes." Maya smiled, the offer a clear sign of the changing tides. She took the bow, examining it carefully, noting the subtle adjustments that could be made to improve comfort and consistency. Their conversation deepened, moving beyond technique to shared experiences and the challenges of competitive archery. The younger members of the team, once indifferent or dismissive, began to seek Maya's feedback during drills. Her quiet confidence and willingness to speak up earned their respect, transforming her from a newcomer to a valued resource. She found herself correcting stances, suggesting breathing techniques, and encouraging focus when nerves threatened to unravel even the most seasoned shooters. Coach Reynolds observed the transformation with a nod of approval. He approached Maya one evening as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the range. "You've changed the team's dynamic," he said, his tone measured but approving. "Your presence is making them better, not just as archers but as a unit." Maya absorbed the compliment with a modest smile, knowing the journey was far from over. The path ahead promised challenges, but the foundation of respect and camaraderie was now firmly in place. Blake's attitude continued to evolve. Where once there had been dismissal, now there was collaboration. He included Maya in strategy discussions and openly acknowledged her contributions during practice sessions. The team's atmosphere, once tinged with rivalry and guarded egos, softened into a space where mutual support fostered improvement. Through it all, Maya remained grounded, balancing the exhilaration of acceptance with the steady focus that had brought her this far. She knew that respect was earned through consistent effort and that trust was fragile, requiring constant nurturing. As days turned into weeks, Maya's role at Longridge grew more integral. She was no longer just the quiet newcomer but a central figure in the team's progress. Her insights helped others refine their form, and her steady presence became a source of encouragement during tense competitions. The transformation was not lost on the veterans or the coaches. Maya's journey from outsider to essential member was a testament to perseverance and the power of skill to transcend initial doubts. The steel targets bore the marks of countless arrows, each a silent witness to the evolving story of the team, and of Maya herself. In quiet moments between sessions, Maya reflected on how far she had come. The sneers and skepticism of the past were now replaced by nods of acknowledgement and words of encouragement. The range had become more than a place of practice. It was a community where she belonged. Yet, beneath the surface of progress, Maya wrestled with deeper questions. The invitation to train with the team opened new doors, but it also demanded choices about the direction of her future. The balance between her job at the range, her studies, and the possibility of competitive archery weighed heavily on her mind. For now, though, the focus was on the present, the thrill of improvement, the camaraderie of the team, and the satisfaction of earning respect through action. Maya knew that the journey ahead would test her resolve in ways she had yet to imagine, but the foundation laid here at Longridge gave her the confidence to face whatever came next. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the range in a warm glow, Maya stood among her teammates, her gaze steady and determined. The path was unfolding before her, promising challenges and triumphs alike. The story was far from over, and she was ready to write the next chapter. The soft hum of the evening wind through the pines was a quiet contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling in Maya's mind as she packed up her gear at the edge of Longridge Archery Range. The day's training had ended hours ago, but the questions that had settled in her heart refused to be silenced. Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the worn leather of her bow grip, the familiar texture grounding her even as uncertainty gnawed at her. Since joining the veteran team, Maya's world had shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. The respect she'd earned, the camaraderie that had blossomed, each was a testament to her perseverance and skill. Yet beneath the surface of this newfound acceptance, a deeper conflict stirred, pulling her in two directions. Her job at the range, the steady work that had supported her through college, was no longer just a means to an end. It had become a part of her identity, a connection to the sport she was growing to love, a place where she could train and improve. But the pull of competitive archery was strong, a siren call promising challenges and glory, demanding more time, more focus, and a willingness to leap into the unknown. Maya glanced up at the fading sky, the stars beginning to twinkle faintly as dusk settled. College textbooks and assignments awaited her in the small apartment she called home, a reminder of the path she had been following before archery had carved its way into her life. Balancing studies with the demands of training was already a delicate dance, one that left her drained and stretched thin. Could she truly pursue both with the dedication each deserved? Her thoughts drifted back to Blake's words earlier that day, the grudging respect in his voice when he'd acknowledged her place on the team. She had felt a surge of pride then, but now the weight of expectation pressed down harder. To train with the veterans meant committing to a level of intensity and sacrifice she hadn't fully prepared for. Maya's mind replayed moments from recent weeks, the early morning spent perfecting her draw, the evenings filled with team drills, the quiet encouragement from Coach Reynolds. Each memory was a thread woven into a tapestry of possibility and pressure. Sitting on the bench by the firing line, she pulled out a small notebook tucked into her gear bag. The pages were filled with observations, techniques, and personal reflections, a chronicle of her journey from track athlete to archer. She flipped through the notes, pausing on a passage about the fundamentals of shooting and the importance of discipline. The notebook was more than a record. It was a mirror reflecting her growth and the challenges ahead. Maya knew that pursuing competitive archery would demand sacrifices, time away from classes, social gatherings, even the comfort of a steady routine. Yet the idea of stepping back, of retreating into the familiar, felt like surrender. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, a message from Coach Reynolds reminding her of an upcoming tournament and inviting her to consider joining the team in a regional competition. The invitation was a tangible symbol of the crossroads she faced. Maya's gaze drifted to the distant targets, now dark silhouettes against the night sky. The range, once just a place of work and practice, had become a proving ground, a space where she tested not only her skill but her resolve. She thought about the teammates who had begun to rely on her insights and encouragement, the way Blake had shifted from skeptic to collaborator. The support was real, but so was the pressure to perform, to live up to expectations that now extended beyond herself. The internal dialogue was relentless. Could she dedicate herself fully to archery without sacrificing her education? Was there a way to balance both, or was she setting herself up for failure? The fear of disappointing those who believed in her gnawed quietly at the edges of her confidence. Maya closed her notebook and stood, stretching the tension from her limbs. The cool night air settled around her, carrying with it the distant sounds of the range staff packing up for the evening. She felt both small and immense in this moment, the weight of choice heavy but the potential for growth undeniable. As she walked toward the exit, her footsteps steady on the gravel path, Maya allowed herself a moment of clarity. Whatever decision she made, it would shape not only her future in archery but the person she was becoming. The journey was hers alone to navigate, filled with uncertainty but also with the promise of transformation. In the quiet night, beneath the vast expanse of stars, Maya embraced the complexity of her path. The questions remained, but so did her determination, to find a way forward that honored both her dreams and her responsibilities. The story was unfolding, and she was ready to face the challenges ahead with the same quiet strength that had brought her this far. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow over Longridge Archery Range, bathing the targets in a soft light that seemed to hold a promise of new beginnings. Maya stood a few paces behind the firing line, her gaze fixed on the familiar circle of color that had become both a challenge and a symbol over the past weeks. The air was still, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a hawk soaring high above the treetops. She traced her fingers along the smooth curve of her bow, the leather grip worn from use but steady in her hands. Around her, the range buzzed quietly with the hum of activity, teammates adjusting their equipment, coaches exchanging notes, the subtle clatter of arrows being prepped. Yet despite the movement, Maya felt a calm settle over her, a quiet confidence born from the journey she had undertaken. Her thoughts drifted back to the early days at Longridge, the skepticism she had faced, the sneers and doubts that had once clouded every step. Those moments felt distant now, like shadows receding in the light of her growing skill and acceptance. She had earned her place here, not through words, but through action, each shot a testament to her dedication and resilience. Maya's breath deepened, steadying as she knocked an arrow and drew the string back, muscles flexing with practiced ease. Her eyes narrowed on the target, the world narrowing to that single point of focus. The familiar rhythm of release followed, the twang of the bowstring, the flight of the arrow, the satisfying thud as it struck the center. The arrow lodged firmly in the bullseye, its shaft quivering slightly against the target's face. Maya allowed herself a small smile, the mark a symbol not just of accuracy but of the journey she had embarked upon. Each hit was a story, a chapter of growth written in the language of discipline and perseverance. Around her, voices rose in quiet conversation, the respect and camaraderie among the team a steady undercurrent. Blake caught her eye and gave a nod, a gesture that had evolved from guarded rivalry to genuine acknowledgement. Coach Reynolds watched from a distance, his expression one of quiet pride, the unspoken approval that meant more than any words. Maya lowered her bow, feeling the familiar weight shift as she prepared for another shot. The targets before her were more than just circles of color, they were milestones of transformation. Each arrow that found its mark was a step forward, a proof of the strength she had found within herself. The path had not been easy. Doubts had surfaced, choices weighed heavily, and moments of uncertainty had challenged her resolve. Yet standing here, surrounded by those who now saw her as part of something greater, Maya felt the power of perseverance settle deep in her bones. Her gaze lifted to the horizon, where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The future was still unwritten, a canvas awaiting her next move. But for now, in this moment, she was grounded, confident, capable, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. The arrow still embedded in the center of the target seemed to pulse with quiet energy, a beacon of all she had overcome and all she was yet to achieve. Maya took a deep breath, the cool evening air filling her lungs, and knocked another arrow with steady hands. As she drew the bowstring back once more, the story continued, one of growth, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of excellence. The journey was far from over, but Maya faced it with the assurance that she had carved her own path, leaving a mark that would not soon be forgotten.